Chairman, it's estimated that the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center received nearly 2,500 complaints in 2020, which represented a 20% increase over the previous year. And over that same time, there was a 225% increase in ransom payoffs from nearly 9 million in 2019 to nearly 30 million in 2020. But it actually may be a lot worse than that, because my understanding is if the payoffs that were reported were $30 million, there's a number of experts who believe it could be 10 times that amount. So we're looking at $350 million. So in other words, only 1 out of 10 of the incidences or even reporting it, 9 out of 10, they actually pay off the criminals. That same report estimated that cyber crimes, whether it's phishing or extortion or identity theft or data breaches of botnets, or that they all collectively cost the American businesses, and after all, small businesses especially employ about half the people in this country, about $4 billion with a B. And again, the chairman mentioned the Colonial Pipeline attack, which my understanding is was one of the most devastating ransomware attacks in U.S. history. And eventually, to contain that attack, the Colonial Pipeline made the decision to pay over $4 million to the criminals. And it turned out the decryption tool that was sent back to them in return for the payment wasn't particularly helpful in restoring the functionality to their networks, which is my understanding oftentimes the case. The good news, of course, is that the Department of Justice was able to track and to seize roughly, my understanding, about half of the payment that was made to the Russian-based hackers. But that still left about $2 million to the criminals to be used against future victims of malware crimes. And it's likely that the figures I've just mentioned only represent the tip of the iceberg of this ever-growing problem. Cybersecurity experts estimate that ransomware victims made an average payment of about $300,000 in 2020. They further suggest that when a company made a ransom payment, less than 1 out of 10 of them actually regained access in a reasonable amount of time to their hijacked data. Undoubtedly, cyber attacks are becoming more frequent. They're having larger impacts, and many, unsurprisingly, are connected to the governments, as has been mentioned, of both Russia and China. So, Mr. Vorndran, let me get to my questions. First, do you agree that of their ill-gotten gains, the payoffs basically that are made to these criminals, some significant portion of that is likely to go towards targeting the next victim or victims, that they're not donating this money, they're not donating it to the Red Cross or the American Cancer Society or the Little Sisters of the Poor. It's more people, the public or businesses, that are going to be targeted. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And that's what I'd like to focus on. We've got to make cybercrime, particularly the use of malware extortion, less lucrative, less profitable to these internet thugs. How about making it illegal to pay them off? After all, giving them money which we know they'll use to go after the next victim is sort of like aiding and abetting the next crime in some ways. Would you agree with that?
So, sir, if you're asking me if I think it's right to make the paying of ransoms illegal, I don't think that's a good decision. Okay. And the reason is because it creates a triple extortion model. And so in our current system, ransomware actors, cyber criminals, can attack a company and hold an extortion for payment to get a decryption key. They can also extort that company or that organization to threaten to leak information, PII, of company employees or other sensitive information. That's the second of the 3 extortions. If you make the paying of ransoms illegal, you're creating a third extortion, which means that if a company chooses to pay and they have now broken the law, then a cyber adversary has the ability to hold them accountable for that in the public's eye and threaten them even more with a higher extortion. So we would actually recommend that that's not the best decision, but that's certainly just an FBI perspective.
Okay, well, I think it's something that certainly ought to be considered because what we're doing right now certainly has not worked. They're still doing it. They're getting more money than ever. Companies are actually allowed to write off on their taxes a payoff. Is that correct?
Sir, I don't know the answer to that question. I apologize.
Well, they are. They can do it, and I would argue that it's against public policy to allow that to occur. And then finally, some insurance companies, I understand, actually advise their clients that paying off the blackmailer is the cheapest course of action. You understand or have heard that?
So I think that,
Gentleman's time has expired. The witness may answer the question.
you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Sir, in terms of advisement of an insurance company to a victim, we think, what we hear is that companies are put in a position to simply make a business decision. So when I go back to my position before I joined the FBI at Procter & Gamble, and we made a very large-scale manufacturing, I was told, hey, Brian, listen, an hour of downtime on this manufacturing line equates to this much revenue. And I think the business equation for any business that becomes a victim is simply that. If we're looking at restoring from backups taking 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, and that equates to $4 million of lost revenue, and we can pay a ransom for $3 million, from a business decision, it's actually cheaper to pay the ransom. Now, to your first point, that just fuels the fire, and that just causes the criminal enterprise to grow stronger. So it is very much a vicious cycle.
Thank you. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.